Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We have former President Trump has a court date today. We will tell you what to expect and also what is going on with his legal team and the judge that's been assigned to the case and all of those details. We also have new details about the Ukrainian counteroffensive and how that is going. New numbers about the economy. Foreclosures are rising, and also downtown San Francisco really struggling. Already seems to be in that sort of like doom loop situation. So we'll tell you about all of that. We also have some new legal wrangling between Tucker Carlson and Fox News. They actually sent him a cease and desist. And Chuck Grassley making some pretty interesting comments on the floor about President Biden with regards to those alleged payments with Burisma, $5 million, Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll tell you about that. We have James Vanderbeek. He is the actor who became famous in Dawson's Creek, to talk about the Democratic primaries and how he became Fox News' favorite Democrat, yes, how he feels about that. But before we get to any of that, we want to say thank you all so much for the incredibly supportive comments and also the wonderful feedback about the new set, which we are super excited about, and also still getting our sea legs around and figuring out all the shots and making them perfect. So we genuinely appreciate all the feedback.
Yeah, it's all continuous improvement here at Breaking Points. Just want to say again, thank you to all the positive support. You guys have been so amazing. Many of you have been checking out our new merchandise with the new beautiful logo, the mugs, and all that stuff. Everything is available, breakingpoints.com. There's a merch tab, and you can become a premium supporter if you want to go ahead and help us continue our expansion, ramp up for all of this. We've got RFK Jr. later on today that we'll be interviewing. We'll be releasing that interview separately, so if you're a premium member and others, keep your eyes glued on the podcast feed. That's going to come sometime in the afternoon. But with that, Krystal, let's get to the show.
President Trump expected in a South Florida courtroom this afternoon at 3 p.m. for his arraignment with regard to those document charges. A lot of questions in this case about the judge that has been assigned, Judge Aileen Cannon. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. So you might recall, she's the one that was involved previously. She's a Trump appointee, a very recent, actually, Trump appointee. And she ruled that there needed to be a special master to go through the documents that were being pulled from Mar-a-Lago. She also basically blocked the prosecution from being able to continue to go through and evaluate those documents at that time. A panel of 3 judges, all of them appointed by Republican presidents, came in and basically said that ruling was wrong and overruled her in quite strong terms. So there are a lot of questions about whether she should recuse herself from overseeing this particular case, which was apparently randomly assigned to her. Let me read a little bit from that article that we just had up on the screen. This was Isaac Chotiner interviewing a legal expert about the question saga about her recusal. So the governing code around when a judge should recuse says they should take themselves out if the judge's impartiality, quote, might reasonably be questioned. Now, this legal expert says the fact that a judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned doesn't mean that the judge is partial. The public may simply not trust the impartiality of the judge. Because public trust in the work of the court is a value as important as the work itself, the rule says the judge should not sit when we can't fairly ask the public to trust what the judge does. That rule is especially important in this case. One thing the prosecution can do is move to recuse Judge Cannon on the ground that, in light of her experience in the search warrant case last year, her impartiality might reasonably be questioned. The way that this works, just as a technical matter, which I'm learning about in real time, is it's actually on the judge herself to decide whether or not she should recuse. Yes. The government can send like a nice note of like, hey, we think maybe you should recuse. She gets to make the ultimate decision. Now, there is a process where if she says, no, I'm good, I'm staying on the case, where the government can appeal, but it is unlikely that those appeals succeed rarely. They do succeed sometimes, but they succeed rarely. And you also risk sort of like pissing off the judge who's important to your case. So it's a little bit complicated for them. One note on just what is going to happen today with this arraignment. So in addition to Judge Cannon, who, as I said, is Trump appointee, who was seen as taking this very favorable ruling towards Trump and being overruled by a bunch of conservative judges, in addition to her being appointed, there's also a magistrate judge who was appointed to be involved with this case as well. They're sort of like, you could see him as like a helper judge. That's the individual who will be overseeing this particular arraignment today. But overall, randomly, this Judge Cannon is the one assigned to the case.
There's a lot of focus here on this judge, and I think it's interesting because this previews exactly what we were trying to show everyone yesterday. Even, regardless of how you may feel about said judge, This sets up even more legal fights and wrangling, which was going to take a lot of time, and you can expect to hear quite a bit about in the coming months, which will, of course, make it so that there is not necessarily going to be a, quote, speedy resolution to this trial, Krystal.
Yes.
That's actually where I think my main takeaway is. I was like, man, the level of wrangling here over just beginning in an initial appearance over just the judge previews all of the procedural fights from here to come, from documents to Supreme Court challenges to the appeals. And as you said yesterday, people who aren't lawyers are like, why should I care about this? Well, you should care because it just shows you the level of wrangling just in this one case, let alone what could come forward in the January 6th case, if that is ever brought against Trump, and how none of that may necessarily be resolved come Election Day 2024.
I think it is very likely, and people need to really take this in, that Election Day is going to be both about, of course, the future of the country and who's going to be president, et cetera, and also whether Trump is going to spend the next 4 years in the White House or in prison. I mean, the charge, listen, the jury's going to be in South Florida. That gives him a better shot in terms of jury selection. That's probably his best chance.
Yes.
Is that they're able to land some hardcore Trump supporter on the jury who just isn't going to convict basically no matter what. Because the facts as laid out, as we know them at this point, if it was anyone else, it'd be open and shut. I mean, I just don't think that there's any denying that, given we literally have him on tape being like, I'm committing crimes here, guys. Look at me committing crimes. So that makes, the stakes, certainly for his supporters who want to see him be a free man, that makes the stakes very high politically. In terms of the timeline, as you're laying out, Saagar, this is going to take a long time to resolve. And he wants it. His team is going to push for this to take a long time to resolve. They're going to fight on the jurisdiction. They're going to be all kinds of motions that they file to try to drag out the process, because he knows really his best chance at maintaining his freedom is to be back in the White House, where he can pardon himself and have control and, be off the hook, at least while he's there, on Pennsylvania Avenue. So they're going to do everything they can to slow this down. So it's a pretty wild dynamic here that we're looking at. In terms of the details for today, just so you guys know what is going to go down, put this up on the screens from NPR, just what will happen at his arraignment. It's scheduled for 3 p.m. Eastern time in Miami. There's not going to be a lot that the public is going to be able to see. They talk about the courthouse is actually connected to an underground garage, so he can be ferried in. It can provide a secure spot for him to be taken to be electronically fingerprinted. Just like in New York, we're not expecting handcuffs, we're not expecting a mugshot, which is not really necessary for such a high-profile figure. We are unlikely, there are not going to be any cameras in the courtroom. We're unlikely to see a lot of what happens. And so, there's not going to be a lot that comes from this court appearance today, expectedly. With Trump, you never know, but that's the expectation. Last time that we did this in New York, there was, we hadn't gotten the details of the case yet. So we're all kind of waiting with bated breath to see, all right, what are the details of the charges? Are there things in here that we don't know about? And when the statement of facts came out, revealed that basically it was what was already in the public record. We already have the charges here. So again, there's not an expectation that we're going to learn a lot more about this case. They do say some reporters will be allowed to watch and share electronic updates, so we will get some account coming out of the courtroom of what happens, but no camera and no expectation that we're going to learn a lot more about what additional evidence the government may have.
It's more of a procedural matter than it is one that is in any way similar to what happened in Manhattan. We're going to get, like you said, the 37 charges, but we already know all the details of every single one of them. The indictment and the charging document already been released. We've had the initial photos. The government itself says they're going to push for a 70-day resolution in terms of starting the trial. But as we keep saying, that does not account for defense motions and for others that must be resolved through the court process. So everyone just buckle up and realize that this is very, very different than what happened in Manhattan. We have the documents. In many ways, the symbolic appearance of him trekking down to the federal courthouse and appearing before the judge, even though we won't get a photo or any of that, is the most important thing that's happening. And then, of course, Krystal, later today, 8:15 p.m., the president will be having or former president, will be having a rally, a press conference at Bedminster.
Yeah.
Not sure if he's going to take any questions. He's going to be flying back to the state of New Jersey after his court appearance, and we will have some analysis later on tonight for everybody around that. So everyone just keep that in mind as we go into today.
Yeah, so before we move on to the next piece about Trump's plans for today's, et cetera, there's a lot of reporting out this morning. We knew already that some high-profile members of his legal team, just before the indictment dropped, bailed on the team.
Right.
And we're starting to get some details over why that is. I mean, none of this is going to surprise you, right? There's tons of infighting. Apparently, there's a lot of upset over Boris Epstein, who is like, you know, some of the lawyers see him as wildly unqualified to be leading this team and have been very critical of some of the filings that he's sent in to judges, including like a court filing that talked about how Trump dominated in the Republican primaries, which is totally irrelevant to a legal case. There were disagreements about like the media strategy, but what appears to be, based on the reporting, is there's a big divide in the potential legal strategy. One side wants to take the very Trumpian approach of being extremely bellicose and making more of a political argument and coming out guns blazing, even at risk of, you know, pissing off the judge, inflaming the jury, whatever. So that's one side wants to take like the very Trumpian approach. And then the other side says, hey, listen, all you need is one juror in South Florida to take your side. So we think that you could actually win this case legally, you know, through the legal process versus the political process by, you know, playing it safe and mounting a traditional defense and doing the things that lawyers and clients normally do. So apparently that's the divide. And there's a lot of reporting this morning about how Trump is really having a hell of a time getting lawyers to replace the dudes who just left. I mean, would you want to work with this guy? I mean, he doesn't pay his bills on time.
Right.
He like will randomly be caught on tape bragging about committing crimes. He lies to his own lawyers. So even though obviously it would come with a ton of prestige to represent the former president in the most, you know, what's going to be the most closely watched case perhaps in the history of the country, even though that comes with all of this prestige, basically everyone in Florida is like, we're good here. And it does matter because, you know, these judges, they're human beings, whether it ends up being Judge Cannon or anyone else, having someone who's local, who understands this particular judge, their particular temperament, maybe has somewhat of a relationship with it. Like, it's gross that those things matter, but having local counsel with that kind of local knowledge actually really does matter in terms of the outcome.
No, you're right. I mean, one thing I learned covering Trump during Russiagate, he went through like multiple different lawyers during the Mueller investigation. There was always a lot of drama. Even the impeachment, if you'll remember, there were like all these different arguments about who was going to speak on his behalf for impeachment 1 and for impeachment 2. I just think in the end of the day, he'll figure it out. You know, there's always somebody in the Republican Party that wants to make a big name for themselves. Now, will he get the most? Someone
will want the glory.
Will he get the most competent defense? I'm just going to go out on a limb and say probably not, just given the caliber. But as always, he will find something. And look, as you know, if the stakes become genuinely existential, it's not like the Republican establishment, or at least some of the lawyers, aren't going to at least have some people come and back him. Like people, that's what happened during the last impeachment. You know, every time there was a lot of consternation. But at the end of the day, like people went to bat for Trump. And especially if he continues to lead in the polls, consider it. Are you really going to, you know, abandon your nominee at the court? No, they're going to, you know, there's too much on the line. There's too much money at stake for some of these people.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.